Okay, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Inclusive Recruitment webinar, a collaboration between the Belonging Effect and Step Up Education Social Enterprise. My name is Ben. I'm the founder of Step Up Network. I'm pleased to be hosting alongside the amazing Hannah. Hannah, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. I know lots of you are joining us live, but also lots of you are catching up on the recording at some point this week. So thank you for joining us for this really important topic.
Hannah, would you like to start by saying a bit more about Belonging Effect, and then I'll go second?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of you will know us as Diverse Educators. We started nearly 8 years ago now as a grassroots group. Diverse Ed became Diverse Educators 5 years ago, and then this September we evolved into the Belonging Effect, and that's for a number of different reasons. If you follow me on LinkedIn, I've written quite a provocative blog today about belonging being a bit of a plaster on the problem, but equally belonging is the door opener, and we know we've got a bit of an anti-woke agenda globally, but also a bit of a DEIB rollback. So we wanted to really make sure that our work is still accessible, and that schools, colleges and trusts aren't sort of put off due to that sort of like community resistance when it comes to the politics around this topic. We are also doing more and more work outside of education as well. I think it's so transferable, the things we talk about. We wanted to drop the name educators actually from our name. So that's who we are. Got a team of 15 people, and all the speakers tonight are people who we love and respect and do quite a lot of collaborations with, including yourself, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah, for that introduction. And Hannah was probably one of the first people we reached out to when we set up Step Up nearly 3 years ago now. So Step Up is a grassroots social enterprise and network for people within education who wish to develop their career somehow. So we used to have like the tagline for new and aspiring leaders in education. But if you look at our community is much wider and broader than that. And we have a wide range of people. And I think it's important to remember that education doesn't just span schools, it spans much further than that, and ultimately we're not here just for teachers, we are here for educators and anyone who works in education, has an interest in education. So we very much focus on making leadership in particular more accessible, more diverse and more flexible, and that's partly why we wanted to run this event tonight and run it in collaboration with the Belonging Effect as well. So we're going to start with why. As I remember Hannah and I doing an event before where we both actually did PowerPoints with start with why, but we didn't really speak about it, and we realized how aligned we were in that thinking. So the reason why we're here is because we know that retention and recruitment is an ongoing topic of conversation, and it can very much be a topic of conversation, or you can actually do something about it. And yes, we can't change a whole system and sector-wide thing, but we can change and influence what we do within our organizations, and also not necessarily in your whole organization, but within your teams and how you lead as well. We know that actually, if you break that down further, if you look at retention recruitment and the reasons sort of why, we talk about at Step Up, there are a lot of gaps within education, and we talk about closing the gap in schools for children, but we don't necessarily we talk about as much for our staff and our adults as well. So I've given some examples there on the slides: the gender pay gap, the diversity gap, the flexible working gap, and ultimately employers are required to do things differently and think differently. And talent management and succession planning recruitment, if you talk to lots of people outside of education, they probably talk about it a lot more and know about it a lot more than we do in schools. And I think a lot of the time, this talent management and succession planning is lost because ultimately people look elsewhere for the roles that they want, because either they don't feel like, as Hannah talked about belonging earlier, they don't feel they belong there, or there aren't the opportunities there, or it is not inclusive and flexible enough in their current organisation there. So that is our starting point of why we're here tonight.
And if I could just add to that to say that we do a lot of training in this space. I sometimes get the pushback, Hannah, we just need somebody to apply, because we know we're in a recruitment crisis and we're also in a retention crisis. And I do know that recruitment is really hard at the moment, and we've got more vacancies than we have applicants. But my call to action for everyone tonight is that is even more reason for why we need to innovate and be courageous and do things differently, and really think about, actually, there's a lot of traditionality and conservatism when it comes to recruitment in any sector. I do think schools and education is quite old-fashioned still, This is an opportunity for us to really shake that up and do things differently. So tonight is about us thinking about recruitment. Sometimes people call this diversifying recruitment, and I call it inclusive recruitment, because it's not just about getting diverse people through the door. It's thinking about what does an inclusive school, workplace look and feel like? What does an inclusive recruitment process feel like for the candidates as well? So just diversity alone isn't enough, because we hear horror stories about settings that have really attracted and recruited diverse candidates who have not stayed very long because the environment has not changed for them. Okay, so that's why it's inclusive. Tonight's going to be really practical. All of the people talking have got various lived experiences, but also leadership and professional experiences. They are disrupting either in their own school, college or trust, or across the system through their grassroots. So hopefully there's going to be lots of practical strategies, tips and experiences for you to take away. Some of you might be here because you are looking to change your setting and you're looking for tips and tricks. Or some of you might be here because you are a senior leader or a chair of governors or someone who works in HR. I know a lot of our HR network are here tonight as well. So either way, there's going to be a value add. And we've very carefully curated a diverse lineup, so you hear a range of different perspectives of people who are going to share quite honestly and candidly some of the barriers that just don't need to be there, and some of the things that have worked or haven't worked. So we've got the two panels, and we're going to look at both sides of the table, the applicant's perspective and also the recruiter's perspective as well.
Thanks, Hannah. And talking of our panel, as Hannah said, we've got two panels. We'll talk a bit more about the logistics of tonight in a moment. And they, as Hannah said, they all represent different organisations, different perspectives, and to try and get that full rounded experience of inclusive recruitment. I think sometimes we can talk about recruitment from just the person applying and looking for a role's perspective, and then the person who's doing, or the people doing the recruitment perspective, as separate things. And we often only talk about it when we are ready to recruit or need to. We're not even ready, I would say, when we need to recruit, as opposed to being prepared to recruit. And that's sort of that way of looking things that's slightly different. So we wanted to mix, and also knowing that actually some people here do both. Some people are looking for a role and will be looking for promotion. I know many of the Step Up community do, but they might also be leaders in schools that have to do this as well. So there's the twofold as well. So we're really grateful to our panelists for giving up their time tonight to join us. George, Janoy, Lindsay, Nadine, Susie, Uta and Yamina. We will give individual instructions for each panel, so they'll introduce themselves and tell you a bit more about themselves. But they're all people that are big supporters of our organisations and we've worked with before.
Absolutely. And on the next slide, these are the organisations they are representing. So Nadine's the founder of Aspiring Head, a fantastic social enterprise, really looking at how we diversify the talent pipeline. We are underrepresented when it comes to the sector, when it comes to people of colour specifically in senior leadership roles and headship roles. And I had the privilege of going to their conference earlier in the year, and the energy was just palpable. And the appetite and the ambition in the room was also really present. And it's us thinking about how we as a system are changing the face of leadership. Janoy is here from Black Men Teach, one half of the founders with Albert, again doing amazing work for one of the most underrepresented groups in the sector, that we are underrepresented when it comes to the global majority, but Black men specifically are really underrepresented when it comes to governance, leadership and teaching. So thinking about the need to create visible role modelling and support networks for that identity group. Chiltern Teaching School are one of the MATs and teaching school hubs who are really disrupting in this space and doing things differently. So if you've not heard of REND, R-E-N-D, they are the founders of a social movement called Racial Equity Networking Dinners. They've been running them for 7 or 8 years now from Luton. And that has mobilised to now those events happening in Birmingham, Northampton, London, Leeds, Manchester, and we hosted the Bristol one recently. Because one of the things I want you to think about tonight is that you can't just put an advert out there and hope for the best that diverse candidates are going to see it or apply. It's about you carefully curating and expanding your networks beyond your schools, colleges and trusts, and going to events like REND are a great way to do that. You are going to meet people you might not normally cross paths with, and those opportunities can then build bridges. Lindsay's here, again, one half of the co-founders of Flexible Teacher Talent with Lucy, doing amazing work when it comes to flexing the system. They started before the Flexible Working Bill was published, and they're now really helping the system respond to that legislation change. So you're going to hear lots of brilliant ideas and case studies from her. And then last but not least, we've got George here, and George is doing some really disruptive and important work when it comes to trans inclusion across the education system, but also specifically thinking about faith settings and Catholic schools, and will be here to share their journey as a trans educator. So the quick link on the slides here takes you to the Belonging Effects website, and all the organisations represented tonight have their own page on there, so you can go and find them and connect with them post tonight's event. Back to you, Ben.
Thanks, Hannah. And I've just, for everyone, posted the link in the chat, so if you're watching live, so tonight, this is our schedule. So as we spoke about, we've got a brief introductions now, and then we're going to have 2 panels, and as Hannah said, we're going to look at it from the 2 perspectives and sort of bring that together at the end through the Q&A and the call to action and next steps, because we want, yes, I'm sure we'll have, because I know of our amazing lineup, we'll have so many ideas and thoughts and experiences, and that's great, but we need to make sure that we're putting that into action in our own context and roles and communities as well. Hannah, final one, I think, is just to clarify. I know we've covered a lot of this, but to just clarify that meaning of it before we begin.
Absolutely. I forgot the slide was here, so thank you for the reminder. It was my slide. So yeah, what do we mean by inclusive recruitment? This is just a working definition that we have used here. So as I've already mentioned, it's thinking about all those different aspects. We often get asked too late to support. And what I mean by that is the advert's out and you've got applicants, and I get a phone call from the CEO or the chair of governors, Hannah, we need some help. We haven't got diverse candidates. We need to be talking 6 months before that. So it's really thinking about every single touch point through a recruitment process, from how we are attracting candidates to who is applying, who's not applying, how we are interviewing them, and how we're also then onboarding them, and who is part of that process at every single stage. When I do this recruitment training, I ask people to map out all the different people involved in the process. They get quite overwhelmed. So training for the governor or the head teacher is not enough. Every single person involved in the process should, as a minimum, have unconscious bias training, but really you need much deeper DIB training to get everybody to understand their part in it. And what we really need to be considering is the value we are adding to our whole school community, the value that our pupils are going to experience by having visible role models, teaching them, leading them, governing them, but also the value that it adds to all the colleagues who are there as well about what is possible. I worry sometimes we tell our young people you can be anything you want to be, but when you then see the staff teaching them and leading them, we're really undermining what we're saying there. So yeah, back to you, Ben, for us to get started with the first panel.
Thank you, Hannah, for that clarity as well. So yeah, we are now going to move on to our first panel, which is all about the candidate experience. So I'm pleased to be joined by George, Uta, and Janoy. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. So first of all, I'm just going to do a bit of a round robin, if that's okay, of just introducing yourself, tell us a bit about who you are, sort of what you do, your background, like a mini bio, if you like, to get us started. So I'll just go in the order of the screen, if that's okay. So George, could we start with you, please?
Perfect, thanks. It's great to be here with you both, and thank you for that introduction. My name is George. I am a transgender and Catholic teacher of religious education in the Catholic school that I attended as a child. I'm also a freelance consultant who looks at LGBT inclusion and how you might do that for staff and students within a faith perspective, which doesn't always feel as inclusive as we might hope it does.
Thanks, George. Janoy, can I come to you next?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for having me. So yeah, my name is Janoy Joseph. I'm an assistant head teacher of a school in South London, and I'm also the co-founder of Black Men Teach. Really looking forward to kind of this this conversation. Hopefully I'm able to kind of share some stuff from my own experience, but also what I'm able to kind of see, especially in the schools that I've kind of worked at as well. So yeah, exciting stuff.
Thanks, Janoy. And last but by no means least, Uta.
Hello everyone, I'm Uta. Thank you for having me tonight. And just like Janoy and George, I'm very happy to share my experience in kind of a candidate and just, sharing with you. I'm working in secondary school at the moment, but I've been collaboratively working with Ben, and it was a fantastic experience. And just like I said, I hope this will be useful for everyone who's tuning in this evening.
Thank you, Uta. Thank you all. So, as we said in the introduction, we're very much going to focus on the candidate's perspective here. And I know that, as Hannah said, Hannah was talking about the recruitment field, that I think with schools in particular, I know we're talking about education as a whole here, but in schools, it can feel like a bit of a minefield, that we do recruitment very differently to most other sectors and organisations. And I think sometimes it can feel like you are going through the apprentice episode with some of the activities you have to do on an interview. So starting with that then, thinking about, as we're thinking about inclusive recruitment and that diversity and ensuring a workplace is diverse, my first question I'm going to put is, what do you look for in a prospective organisation, whether that be in an advert, whether it be looking around or a role, that demonstrates that organisation is genuinely diverse and inclusive? Very easy to use the words diversity and inclusion within an advert, and flexibility, as I know we'll talk about flexibility later. But what are the sort of things that you would advise, or from your own experience, your own lived experiences, things to look for? So I'll go back the other way around now. So Uta, if I could start with you, what sort of things have you experienced, or would you suggest looking at?
In an advert, I think the main things that I would look into is, I think for me, really, I will look at the different words and the wording of the advert, but at the same time, I will remember it's an advert. So I think what I will really look into is when I go and visit the school, if there's an opportunity to do so, or even if they suggest to give a call. Some advert will say you can do an informal call. So what I will do is before I apply, I will see if that translates in the conversation I have on the phone. And if I have the opportunity to visit, I will actually try and look for maybe what they're trying to hide or not, and just trying to see if what they're saying in the advert match my experience in the school. And specifically, I think what I would look for, if you are ambitious, for example, I would try and see in terms of the leadership of the school, if they have anybody that looks like me. Because if you're ambitious and you're going to get in any kind of organization, and from my perspective, if I don't see anybody that looks like me, I'm just going to be kind of wary, and I'm going to be asking questions. Why has it not happened yet? And I think those are the kind of thing I would try and dig deeper. So I'm not going to say I'm just going to reject that advert because of that. But when I go in and visit, I will definitely ask questions about that. And during the interview process, I will also try and understand what's going on. The other things that I would say in terms of diverse recruitment, and I think this is where places like you, where networks come in, is I would really try and find out from my network if anybody knows about the place, and that will kind of help me get maybe a clearer picture if the advert is kind of truthful or not truthful.
That's brilliant. So many tips there, Uta. Thank you so much. Janoy?
Yeah, it's just interesting that we all just nodded our head when we said about using our networks. I think that is such an important kind of tactic that is safe, but also reassuring of yourself. So that's one thing I'll definitely say. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that for you to ask around. It's important for you to kind of get the lay of the land and how it is on a day-by-day basis if you cannot visit the school. And even if you do visit the school, you only see a portion of what they want to what they want you to kind of see. When I look at, or when I consider the advertisement of a prospective workplace, and we're kind of going through the lens of it being diverse and very inclusive, I think one of the key things for myself, or I'm in this space now in my journey, my career, where there's certain, I don't want to say buzzwords, but I look at the language. And when I talk about the language, I'm also talking about the things, the signs, or the words that signal like psychological safety. Look at whether or not that role is going to, number one, see me as, you know, a leader or whatever position I'm applying for, but my intersectionality is that I am also black and a male. So are they going to, you know, give identity to that as part of myself as well? So I'm always looking for spaces like that. And as Uta said, you know, and sorry for mispronounce your name, but it's more so along the lines of you seeing leaders in a variety, in a capacity, or in different stages, not only in the recruitment parts of it, but then also people who work there, you know, to see the level. So I always check a staff profile of a school and be like, okay, who do they have? What are they saying? And I just really look into that. So, you know, coming down to the fact that representation across all levels, not just in the marketing photos, but really trying to understand it. And the last thing, which I think is super important, is like a clear and transparent process. And what I mean by that is that not necessarily like vague promises, but more so along the lines that if I can't see the how, then I'm not necessarily going to trust the what. And what I mean by that ultimately comes down to this whole idea of, by the time I decide to apply for another job, for many individuals that come from marginalized background, the battle to get to that point can be a lot, can be quite intense. And so they don't necessarily want to kind of be mixed in with the fluff of it all. Just be very clear what it's going to be like, what's included. Is it 2 days? Is it 3 days? What's the process? So on and so forth. So I know. And I think that's very, very helpful for individuals who are definitely from marginalized background, who are looking to go into a different space.
That's great. Thank you, Janai. And George?
So I look at a lot of jobs and then never apply, but not for the reasons that people have said, just because I'm nosy. One of the things I think that's it's important for me is differentiating between what feels performative and what feels real. So I know in our school we applied for the Equality Teach Award, and it took a lot out of us because it actually made us say, this is where we do what we say we're doing. So if someone has got some engagement with events, with campaigns, you know, it sounds silly almost, but I would type inclusion or diversity, or, you know, bearing in mind it's a school website, I would type something into that website and see what comes up. Because if the first thing that comes up and the only thing that comes up is a diversity statement that's clearly been written for, you know, the sake of having it on the website, that to me indicates that it's performative. It's not real. One of the things I think is really key, and I know this from my practice, so I think it goes kind of to Uta's point, if you're going to visit a school, that seeing visibility across staff, although it can be helpful, isn't necessarily as key as it might be seeing visibility amongst students, people that might feel, you know, pupils that might feel comfortable wearing a pride flag, or, you know, whatever it might be. When pupils feel comfortable to do those things, that indicates to me that the school is doing something that allows pupils to feel that they can do that. If I see staff wearing something, I think, yeah, it's nice, but, you know, I don't, you know, if for example a PE department were wearing rainbow laces, I think, yeah, it's nice, but I can't see any of those in your lesson. I can't see any students doing that, which indicates to me it's performative rather than real. I guess I always want to talk kind of about policies in practice as well. I'm always keen to kind of to talk to staff and say, actually, you know, what does inclusion look like at the school, or what do you know about inclusion? What do you know about the Equality Act? And what I want to see then is what's there, what they can talk about, but also what's not there, because what's not there doesn't indicate it's not happening. But if it's not clear, I think that shows that whatever the inclusion work is being doing is probably in some way performative rather than real. So that's the question I always ask myself when I see something: what's performative, what's real? And then I go away and kind of do a little bit of extra work on, you know, looking at the website, doing a quick Google search. When I visit, what can I see that shows that people who are not being paid to be here feel is important for the community.
Thank you, George, and thank you all of you. There's some real, I've written loads of notes just from one question, so much there, and I think that's really important. That I really love that bit, the performative and the real, because yeah, it is like a sales pitch when you're walking around school or looking at a website. Actually, you know, a lot of organisations are very quick to say, this is a two-way process, but there are some places where it's genuinely a two-way process and some places where it's not. And I think that is important, those things about using your networks, looking at policies and practices, asking questions, looking at the language that is used, both written but also verbal, and does it translate to both? And also, I think the big thing here as well, like I know we spoke, lots of you referenced visits and things like that, and being able to speak to people, is can you genuinely access those people? And if so, who is it? Is it the head teacher or is it their HR officer? If we're talking about school, and actually the different perspectives you might get from different people is really important. Thank you for that. So talked about a lot of things that we could do. However, one of the things that people, even though we are in a recruitment and retention crisis, if you like, or retention and recruitment crisis rather, we can afford to be picky when looking at roles and not just going for that first role that we see. And I know for some people that might not be as easy as others. But I know one of the things that I've spoken to people about when they're looking at jobs is those things that you need to err on the side of caution when looking at workplaces and looking at roles. Some cases you can see them as like red flags waving right at you as you look for a role or walk around. In some cases, you might not see that until you're actually within the organisation, which is obviously much harder. But what sort of things do you think people should? I know we've talked about some of the things you can do, but what are sort of things people should be actively aware of that they might need to be a little bit cautious about, or things that they might need to do very carefully as part of this process? Janoy, can I come to you first on that one, please?
Yeah. Okay. I know there's like two key questions that you asked there. This is the first one, just to repeat that.
The main thing is to sort of get what sort of things should people be cautious about as part of this process. So, for example, I know some people might see a role and love it because they think it's their dream school, but actually when they get in or when they go around, they're like, I'm not sure about this. Or it might be the certain person that you're dealing with or the certain organizational fit. So just sort of that cautious approach to inclusive recruitment from a candidate's perspective, if you like.
Okay. So let's say, for example, if we talk about that progression for being a topic, one of the things that you may want to kind of consider is just maybe the pathways or the transparency of progression. Like, is it a case that there's opportunities for you to progress? I think an inclusive workplace, ultimately, they do make that is something that's very transparent from the beginning. Like, if there is routes for progression, absolutely, that's something that you could look for. I think as well is for you to kind of ultimately think about this. And I'll bring back to the point I made earlier, is that it's just the language that's kind of used in terms of like that signals certain biases. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about idea of like things that solely set out to that organization and the culture. Is it performative? Is it something that's embedded in their values? All these kind of things. I think unless this is your first job that you're looking for, we've all been around the block. And we all kind of know the jargon that's kind of used on a lot of these applications, a lot of these different stages and stuff like that. And it's ultimately for you to kind of just sift through it. I'm going to be a bit daring and say this whole idea that I do feel like there's a lesson in everything. So even if you do end up working at a school that totally ticked all the boxes until you started working in there, you ultimately can take some form of lessons from that opportunity. But then be very flexible about moving on to the next phase and learn whatever you can learn during that time.
Definitely, I love that lesson and everything. Thanks, Janoy. George, can I come to you next?
Yeah, can I just say thank you for going to Janoy first, because that gave me some thinking time. I kind of have two things, and they are distinctly different. But they've both come up within the practice that I've had. So I'll start with the thing that was obvious at first. When I brought up my diverse kind of personality, I said, I'm trans and I need to know how to navigate that in this space where I'm not sure how it will be taken. I was sort of told, but you don't have to talk about that. It's your private life. Like, don't worry about it. You don't need to speak about it. You've got nothing in place that's supporting me, regardless of questions, or whatever might be happening. But B, you're putting something on me that you're not putting on other people who fit a kind of cis heteronormative kind of, you know, idea. Am I back? I'm back. I think the other side of that for me is the fact that because you are seen, you know, and I'm doing it in inverted commas because we all know this, the fact that you're seen as diverse, you then become the expert in the room, and that then someone's like, that's for you. You're going to do everything we need for diversity and inclusion. And you might be a new teacher, you might not be, but actually that is a massive, it's incorrect to do it anyway, but it's a massive onus to put on someone. And I think that actually you've got to be aware of people downplaying who you are, but also kind of upscaling the fact that because you are someone who meets one or several of the protected characteristics, that you're going to be the champion for everyone and you're going to take that on, you know, certainly so if it's not part of the job that you're applying for. So those would be my two kind of red flags.
Perfect. Thank you, George. I think so important there, that sort of authenticity piece, that you're able to take your full self to work, and then people not trying to compartmentalize you, as you said. And no, you're a teacher now. You don't need to talk about that, you know. And I think that's where we can get things wrong, can't we? So thank you for sharing that. Uta, come to you now.
What I would say is, I think the first thing is during the interview, I would say don't be shy. And, you know, earlier you said it's a two-way street. I think you need to actually, from the interview, come, you know, your whole authentic self, and be prepared as well to kind of, I think at the interview, of course, you're applying is because you want the job, you think you're the best fit, and you think this is going to be a perfect match. But at the same time, you have to go in with both eyes open, I would say, and come in with your set of questions and kind of flip the script and be ready to kind of hear all the kind of signals that could be red flag or not. So that's the first thing during the interview. Don't be shy. Just, you know, make sure they know who you are from the get-go. Now, let's imagine you got the job and it's only afterwards that you actually realize, okay, it's not what you thought it was. Here you've got, I would say, an opportunity to kind of change things because they did actually recruit you. So maybe they want to, you know, go in that direction, but it's a bit what George was saying, where maybe they're going to start putting the onus on you, and you are going to be the trailblazer trying to, you know, bring in change. So if, you know, you're up for it, well, why not? You could be, you know, that trailblazer that actually going to be the change that you want to see in the school. Or I guess you could just, you know, go and find something else. It all depends on you and how safe you feel, you know, to actually bring in the change, or go somewhere else where you will feel seen and wanted. So I think, yeah, it's two different perspectives. I think from the interview, you need to really be as honest as possible. I think sometimes people may go in interviews and they feel like they have to fit in, they have to fit the mold. Actually, no, you don't. You have to go in and be honest with yourself. And this way, I think you will see straight away, like George was saying, you know, when you are saying, okay, this is me, this is who I am, and they say, oh, you don't need to actually tell us all about you. Maybe listen. And if you decide to take the job, actually say, you know what, I told you who I was, you took me on, this is what I would like to do. Are we going to do it together, or shall I go and get this done somewhere else? I think these are the two kind of advice I would share.
Thanks, Uta. And I think one of the things that's come across from all three of your responses there, which it actually segues really nicely into the second piece. The next question I'm going to ask is more that sort of that importance of authenticity and in how that creates that value of belonging for ourselves and that psychological safety that we experience. And I know, Uta, like you said there, like, don't be shy. And yeah, actually, do they allow you, do the panel or the people that interact with you allow you to do that? Or do they want it as a very cold process of you're the candidate, we're the panel, and you have to conform in a certain way? But also, I think the other part here that seemed really important is that culture of an organization. And yes, you might get a feel for it when you go for a job, whether that be in the interview, whether it be on the visit, or whatever process they're using. But also, I remember this was a quote from someone who was talking to me about when I moved on to a new role, and was saying, you know, don't underestimate what you can bring to a culture. You might walk in and actually the culture might not be right, but actually you can be a little part or a big part of changing that. And then you can make the decision, well, do I want to stay and change it? Or is it better that I go and change it somewhere else? So yeah, thank you. So sort of this question I'm going to ask, which will lead really nicely into our next panel that Hannah's going to moderate, all around sort of from the employers and leaders perspective. Now, I know some of you lead teams, or you lead people who have led people and have different, slightly different roles in schools and in education. What can you do as a leader of a team, of an organisation, or part of an organisation, or your contribution to that wider organisation as a leader? What can you do within your teams to sort of develop that culture of inclusion, belonging, and inclusive recruitment, and being part of that? So what could you do as practical strategies? Because like we said, we want to give people things that they can take away tonight that can sort of build that culture of inclusion, belonging. Uta, could I come to you first, please?
Yeah, I think for me, it's inclusion is very important. I really, well, I hope anyways that I live in kind of, this is, for me, there's nothing more important in a school. So what I do is I would make sure that I kind of include my team in the decision making. So there's some things that I really like is never say no. So I'm not going to always say yes, but I will never say no. So I will always be open to new ideas, whichever one brings an idea, and I will maybe suggest another time when I got that headspace to talk about it. But definitely be open to whatever kind of idea. And beyond that, what I would do is I will actually put that person forward. So I will encourage my team to come in with ideas, but also be the one presenting it, because even though I am the one kind of in charge or I'm leading, well, we are all leaders. So I'm always thinking, okay, that was a brilliant idea. I really like that. And I want you to actually come in and present it to the rest of the team. And the reason I'm doing this is twofold. So first of all, because inclusion is very important to me, but also, you know what you and Anna were saying earlier in terms of succession planning. And I think maybe a lot of people actually are not staying in the role because they don't actually see any kind of progression. They don't really feel like they're being heard or seen. And I'm just thinking, okay, what can I do at my own level actually to amplify their voice and their actions? Because I think as a leader, it's very easy to kind of, take ownership for everything and say, okay, yeah, I came up with that brilliant. Actually, it wasn't me, it was so and so, and we did a brilliant job on it. So I think this is how I do it in my team. And what I want to add is really in schools, I think it's very important because we are the leaders, sorry, but I think the students also. So this is sometimes I will put the spotlight on the students, not just the people in my team. And I will make sure when I select students for awards or for presentation or anything, I will try and make sure it's a wide range as well. And when I do talk to the students, because it's about, do they know about the opportunity? I will try and make sure all the students are aware, as many colleagues are possible are aware of whatever opportunity, and make sure they actually, if they need support, to engage with that opportunity. For example, if people in my team or not in my team who are trying to get a promotion, within the school or somewhere else, I will be there to support her because I'm really passionate about it. And I think we must not just, keep it in our department, in our school. I think it needs to be wider and everywhere possible, because I think it's essential. Inclusion is really essential. It's not just a word that we are, using in school because Ofsted has decided that what is going to be part of the framework. No, it's really the way we live in school, outside of school, and we include everyone, our team, our leaders, the students, even, like the people at the shops, anyone.
Yeah. Thank you, Uta. George?
Yes, just very quickly. So what I would say for me is that there are two types of experts. I sat on a panel very, very recently with trainee doctors, and I sat with someone who was the leading expert in sickle cell in Black women over 30. But I sat there as someone who just receives healthcare as a trans person. And the questions were coming into both of us that actually I am an expert in my expertise, in my experience, sorry, and they are an expert in their area. And I think that when we as leaders recognize the fact that people are coming to us with expertise, that actually we level the playing field of talking about that sharing that idea that Uta was saying. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, George. And last but by no means the least, Janoy.
Yeah, I'll be super quick. Two things I'd say. Number one is that leaders ultimately must model the vulnerability and the inclusivity and the accountability that we want to kind of see. I think that's very, very important. And the second thing I'd say is organizations, and that also includes, I think when you work with people, you have to ultimately build certain systems of support. And so, for example, let's say if you line manage somebody, if you manage a team, it's setting aside time, yes, to talk about the business, but then also to talk about developing them as individuals as well when it comes to just practicing that inclusion and inclusivity, seeing them as individuals in the role, but then also as individuals who are part of your team, which links very, very well to what I said before by the other panelists about creating spaces where people are seen.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you so much. I think we could have talked for much, much longer there because you all had great insights. Thank you so much. I know lots of the other panelists who are behind backstage ready for the second panel have said the same. Thank you so much. And if you're able to join us for the Q&A later, we'll see you back shortly. But thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. What a way, Hannah, to start our event. That was a great panel.
Yeah, and just really respect the honesty, vulnerability and candor that they all shared as well, and the really practical advice, because we don't always end up where we're supposed to be, and it's about the choices you make when you find yourself, even when you think you've done the due diligence. That really resonated with me as well. So thank you for moderating, and thank you to our first three speakers. We're now going to welcome on panel 4, which I'm going to moderate for the next sort of like 30 minutes. And then as Ben said, we're going to go to a Q&A. So I can't actually see the comments, but I'm hoping that you are putting in comments and questions in the chat so we can then engage with you before we close out tonight. So I'm hoping I've got 4 speakers behind the scene. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we've got one missing. Hopefully we have 4. Oh,
Nadine should be with us shortly, hopefully. Perfect. So I'll add her in when she joins.
Perfect. So what we'll do is lovely to see you all, and we'll do some introductions so the audience know who we have here. You know me, I always go A to Z. So Lindsay, you're first. So lovely to see you. Can you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are, what you do, and where you do it, please, Lindsay?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Lindsay Patience. I am one half of Flexible Teacher Talent. So we're an organisation who support in the education sector with flexible working at an individual level, at school and trust level, but also in work in the wider sector and with the DFE. And I'm also a part-time teacher. I work 4 days a week in a school in Putney in South West London.
Awesome. It's got both hats on here then tonight, haven't we? Thinking about the different sides of the table we sit on. So thank you, Lindsay. Lovely to see you. Susie, great to have you here. Do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, hi, I'm Susie Waters and I'm Operations Manager of the Julian Teaching School Hub and Norfolk Research School based in Norwich. I think I first started really getting interested in how to promote diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging in my setting, because we are based within a Catholic school, and I do quite a lot of work with the staff wellbeing team within the school. So that kind of kick-started where I am now, I guess.
Brilliant. And it's great to have you here, Susie, and I'm looking forward to hearing all the work you are doing through that lens. And last but not least, Yamina, great to see you. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Yamina. I am currently an education project specialist at Chiltern Learning Trust, working alongside Being Luminary and Mission 44 and the Chartered College of Teaching. I always forget all the consortium organisations leading a project on increasing diversity in IGT with a focus on global majority trainee teachers. But beyond that, I'm also a Belonging Effect associate trainer and a freelance consultant, and I'm a former deputy head teacher in a secondary school.
So we've got a wealth of different experiences on the call, and as George said, like lived experience, leadership experience, but we've also got some regional diversity. I think we forget about that diversity sometimes. So we've got some different points of the country. So we've got three different parts we're going to talk about. We're going to think about the diversification of the workforce, the flexing of the workforce, and then the disruption of how we do things. So let's start with diversifying the workforce. Yamina, do you want to talk a little bit about the project you're co-leading and why it's so important for us to diversify those who are stepping into the profession?
Yeah, thank you. So this project is funded by Mission 44, which is, if you don't know, Sir Lewis Hamilton's charity foundation. It's my only claim to fame. I've never met him, anyone, although everyone keeps him. And the project is funded specifically for secondary to begin with, but it's really looking at increasing diversity, particularly for global majority trainee teachers, because as we can see from the NFER research from 2020 to 2024 and now even 2025, there is a appetite from trainee teachers from global majority backgrounds in application. There's a high kind of increase in the rate of them applying, but at every stage, from application stage to interview stage, all the way into kind of senior leadership, they're rejected, in contrast to their kind of white colleagues, who there's actually underrepresentation when it comes to white colleagues applying for teacher training, but there's overrepresentation when it comes to every other stage, from acceptance into kind of retention in even ITT, and then obviously into senior leadership. So that's why kind of we're really working and focusing on this, and this project has been funded. It's as part of kind of other consortium organizations who are looking at diversity in education in general. But this particular project looks at kind of three strands. The first strand is around skits and what skits themselves and ITT providers can do to kind of remove systemic and structural barriers. And that's the first acknowledgement that there are systemic and structural barriers that stop global majority trained teachers. And actually, if we think about it from any protected characteristic, that stop colleagues from diverse background entering the profession and then staying in the profession. So what we've done is we're working with fellows of the Chartered College of Teaching, who are also experts in DER, diversity, equity, inclusion, to kind of coach some skits who are part of our kind of project. And we're already on cohort 2. So we've got 20 skits at the moment working with us nationally. The second part of the project and the strand is an online course where we've asked sector experts to essentially share their kind of advice, their expertise around recruitment, retention, and specifically assessment of QTS and what the structural barriers are there, and also recommendations as well. Hi, Nadine. And then the third element is the kind of chartered teacher status, because as part of this problem or issue is the fact that actually there isn't diversity in ITT workforce, in staff leadership and the workforce there. So that might be is a contributing factor to global majority trainee teachers kind of entering and staying in the profession. So we try to really look at what we can do to provide support and accreditation and networking opportunities for global majority trainee teachers and teacher educators at the moment as well. I hope I've summarized.
No, it's a great summary, Yamina. Thank you so much, Nadine. It's lovely to see you. You've got a few minutes. I'll let you settle in. I'm going to go round the room and I'll come back to you. So I wanted to go to Susie next, because the work that Yamina's talking about, Susie, you've been doing through your Teaching School Hub. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing and why you've been doing it?
Yeah, so I've kind of wiggled my way into a niche where I'm really interested in at what point during the life cycle of a teacher we lose certain demographics from the profession. So as Yamina, as you've just entirely accurately said, global majority people from applications to ITT onwards are at a massive disadvantage. But I'm also really interested in where we might lose LGBTQ plus colleagues, where we might lose neurodivergent or disabled colleagues. We know where we lose mothers, and looking at how the invariable consequence of those stages in the life cycle is where we end up with a system where leaders all look the same, and where it's very difficult for us to know whether that senior leader is absolutely objectively the right person for the job, when they may in fact have been the only person for the job because of all of those systemic issues further down the line. And I think that's really interesting, and that's something that as a teaching school hub, we work obviously with early career teachers largely, and when we support them, we're trying to do it in a pastoral way as well as providing training, so that we can kind of find where they have that vulnerability and support them to speak up and to ask for what they need, and to give them that kind of professional backing to do so when they're still so early in their career.
Thank you. And I feel like we're going through the kind of the lifespan of a teacher. We're going to come to Lindsay next. We become a teacher, we progress in teaching, we might then become a parent, Lindsay. And I think when we talk about diversifying the workforce, we often just think about some protected characteristics, specifically race, which we really need to address. But actually, the protected characteristic of being a parent, and we know the attrition rates are shocking when it comes to schools not being family friendly. Do you want to talk a little bit about why it's important to diversify the workforce when it comes to other identities as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And what Susie said there about when we lose mums, we know that age 30 to 39 demographic of women are a big loss from the workforce. But when Lucy and I started Flexible Teacher Talent, we were both new mums ourselves, and we thought we were going to be helping keep people in the profession through flexible working who were like us, who were mums, who had young families. And actually, the people who need flexible working are so wide ranging. The reasons that people need flexible working are huge. And we hadn't thought about people with older children. We hadn't really thought about people with health needs, people going through menopause, people with other caring responsibilities apart from children. And actually there's a huge range of reasons why you might need to work flexibly, or why you might want to work flexibly. So we're seeing that thing with millennials coming in as well, where they just want to have a more portfolio career, they just want to have a life outside of teaching. But the big focus for us has been on women and keeping women in. Like it is a huge issue for women. And actually, just anecdotally, I haven't got proper data on it, but we help women who have their flexible working requests turned down. And we do see an overrepresentation in people from global majority backgrounds coming to us for help. And there is some great research, well, not great, terrifying research out of the University of Kent around asking for flexible working and getting flexible working when you're from different backgrounds. And actually that is something that's really important at the recruitment stage. Can you ask as part of the process for flexible working, but also once you're in post and enroll, if you can't ask for flexible working, if you can't get flexible working, we all need it at different points in our lives. Like when I was a young deputy head teacher and I couldn't imagine having any responsibilities or commitments, and my whole life was school, I had no concept that people might want to or need to work flexibly. And actually, you know, as I've gone through my life and I've had children and I've had other things going on, like you might, like any of us are in a position where we could need to work flexibly for whatever reason at some point. And your access to that and the being able to get that is really important if you want to have an inclusive school. And actually, I don't think any school can claim that they are truly inclusive if they don't offer flexible working in some form, because anyone might need to work flexibly at any point, but particularly mothers.
And I'm interested for us to dig out that data on intersectionality, because we know there's the double whammy of being a woman and woman of colour in education, but if you're a parent as well, that's triple disadvantage. And if there's bias within not only the recruitment and retention system, but also who gets to do flexible working or be a co-leader or a part-time teacher, part-time leader, then that's also, like you say, going to actually minimise and marginalise further a group who are already marginalised, which leads us on to Nadine, who wears quite a few of these hats. And Nadine, like everyone else introduced themselves in the beginning, just take a minute just to introduce who you are, what you do, where you do it, and your day job and your passion project, and then I'll come to a question for you.
Okay, hi, evening everyone. Pleasure to be here. Yes, so my name is Nadine Bernard. I am a full-time, I say head teacher, and I'm of a primary school in Southwest London. I'm also the founder and CEO of a community interest company called Aspiring Heads, which is tackling racial inequality in leadership. I'm also most recently an author of a book called Your Leadership Matters, Empowering Educators of the Global Majority and Allies. And ultimately just love supporting, helping individuals to fulfill their potential and to defy the odds, really. Yeah, anything else?
And a mum of three.
And a mum of three, yeah. I am a mum of three, 5-year-old, also a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old. So I've got the teenage and also the younger one as well.
Got it all going on. So, do you mean tell us a little bit about why you started Aspiring Heads and the impact you're having or want to be having across the system with your amazing network?
Yeah, so Aspiring Heads was founded in 2020 when, you know, the impact of race was kind of magnified in terms of the lack of equality and so forth. And so I developed a program called Aspiring Heads, which is a leadership program that lasts over 6 months. And the whole premise of it is to encourage, empower, and help and support those from the global majority to step into leadership positions, but ultimately just to progress their careers, whatever they feel that looks like. And so ultimately, we're there as someone to help them. We recognize that we're not supporting individuals who do not have the capabilities, but sometimes individuals come to us who are crushed by the system, who are starting to question themselves because of all the different things that have happened to them, or some who actually do understand what they bring to the table, but still really struggling to navigate through. And with my experience of gaining headship, I gained headship quite quickly, which is rare. However, very quickly, I encountered things, discrimination, racism, and so forth, that really crushed me as a leader. And ultimately, I want to be able to help others have a better toolkit than I had, so that they can, navigate with confidence, and just no matter what they may face, they're knowing that there is agency and there's things that we can do. Sometimes we have to do it collectively to be able to move the needle forward one more step.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nadine. Thank you for the brilliant work that you and the team are doing. If I move us into the second question, I'm going to put these two together because of time. So, do you mean I want the audience to be a bit bolder and a bit more courageous about doing things differently? And I want you just to share some examples around how we can not only dismantle the systemic issues, but actually disrupt how we recruit. So, Lindsay, can I come to you first? Like, you're seeing loads of great practice, but also a lot of probably poor practice. What are some of the things you'd like to share with the audience about, like, some quick wins, perhaps, about how they can go around disrupting how we recruit and how we retain parents?
Yeah, I mean, there's a really simple one around flexible working. So, and I think it was George who said it before about sometimes things are really performative. So putting we're open to flexible working on your job adverts, I mean, that's great. That's a really nice start. But actually what we're seeing in terms of really good practice around this is people listing potential options. You could work condensed hours. We're happy to talk about part-time between 2 days and 4 days. You can apply for this role and say that you would like to do it with a job share partner, like giving people the ideas of types of things that they can ask for, and also explaining that that's not an exhaustive list and that they're open to talking about it. Like just that little logo that says we're open to flexible working actually often is just something that someone in HR has told someone to put on a job advert. And actually, if you do ask about flexible working in the interview, they have no idea how to ask. But also in terms of thinking about flexible working throughout the application process. So are you going to ask candidates about it at the end of the interview? Are you going to wait until the offers stage and then discuss it with them? Are you going to be very clear that there will be a point at some point during the interview process to talk about flexible working? And also just one really simple thing around having policies available before people apply for jobs. Maternity policy should be available, and the flexible working policy should be available without people having to look for it. A colleague of mine has just got a new job, and she's like, oh, how do I ask them about the maternity policy, because I'm terrified that that's going to make them realize that I'm planning to have a baby. So just a few really simple things like that can make a big difference.
Yeah, I love that. It's being explicit and being clear and making the information readily available, so we're not digging around trying to find the information we actually need to make an informed decision. So thank you, great starting. Susie, do you want to build on that? Like, what are some of the things that you're giving a good shape to, and what are you doing differently in your setting?
I was really taken by something George said in the first panel, which is that he's nosy. I am obsessed with a job description. I will read any and all job descriptions that I see. And part of the reason for that is because so many job descriptions are so lazy and so poorly written, or they are overly detailed. We know that overly detailed job descriptions put people off applying from underrepresented groups. And I think what I try and do is I try and be very clear about what the job involves, but I don't demand skills that can be learned on the job to be there when you apply. My person specs are really short because it's just not necessary to have a laundry list of attributes from people when we know that we can develop our staff. Another thing that I like to do is offer accommodations as standard when we invite to interview. So I provide interview questions in advance. And if we can offer a choice of in-person or online interview, any kind of private space, quiet space, that kind of thing. I don't want people to have to ask for it if it's something that we can do anyway. Obviously, anything that we don't list that they feel comfortable asking for. But I think you're putting a lot on someone who's already in a vulnerable position as an applicant to then disclose that they might have additional needs. I think that's something, if you can avoid them having to ask for it, you should. And the third thing is that we don't do this at the moment, but it is my dream, is to have information available on the website as standard, such as a map of the site, a map of the buildings, you know, general visitor access instructions, such as this is how you enter the site, this is where you go, this is who you speak to, because it takes away a lot of anxiety. And, you know, it's useful for parents and visitors, but it's particularly useful for applicants and people coming to interview who, again, it takes away a little bit of that nervousness for them, and it benefits everyone.
Yeah, I love that. And I wholeheartedly agree with the leading with what we can do to include you, because I don't need those things, but I still want to work for you because you're doing this in a really authentic way. Going back to the challenge and the performativity and the tick boxes, that actually, like, if you list off, we've got a prayer room, we've got halal food, we've got a quiet room, we've got a fridge if you're breastfeeding, like it's pretty basic, isn't it? Rather than waiting for someone to say, pick me, I'm different. These are all the things we can actually support you. So thank you just for detailing that, Susie. Yamina, how about you then, working in ITTE specifically on your project, but like you've got 20 different settings, you've got lots of different advice from different coaches. What are some of the things that you're magpieing or you want to share back to the audience that they can build into their practice?
Yeah, as part of the online course, we had colleagues like, you know, Dr. Professor Paul Miller, we had Anne Palmer, and they just sharing their brilliance. And I've just magpied these, to be fair. But one of the things that Anne Palmer talks about, and actually I see in now with Children Learning Trust and how they do it in terms of recruitment, is around offering flexible community-focused events as part of their outreach work and their kind of marketing, because there is bias even in marketing and outreach. Who are we accessing? Who are we supporting? You know, we know like Belonging Effect has a diverse workforce, you know, that the jobs board and things like that, but where are you sharing that information, and how are you accessing a diverse range of teachers, essentially? So that's one of the things that I've taken away from Anne Palmer's article around kind of really thinking about how we remove those barriers. And I think what Susie, you said is really important as somebody who is from many intersectional marginalized backgrounds, particularly somebody who's neurodiverse. I get a lot of anxiety about, is there going to be halal food? Do I have to say, oh, it's okay, I'll be happy with the vegetarian? Am I going to have a prayer space? Actually, as somebody who's neurodiverse, I'm dyspraxic. I find it really stressful thinking about how do I get to places. If people preempt that and really think about those reasonable adjustments and include that as part of just this is the way we do it here, then actually you're making it really easy in terms of communication, and that kind of inclusive communication is a key part of that. So it's all well and good having a DEI statement to say, hey, we're inclusive, but actually is it performative? So really thinking beyond kind of surface level reforms, and then thinking about Anne Palmer talked about cultural additivity, and I just love that. Really thinking about actually what do people from diverse backgrounds and perspective bring, and the value that they bring, and actually really demonstrating that you value that. And because we know the research shows that there's a really predominant way in which recruiters think about what an effective teacher looks like, what an effective leader looks like, which is probably contributing to this kind of recruitment crisis, particularly for people with protected characteristics. So really thinking differently about what do these candidates bring. Is somebody who's dyslexic, what will Yamina bring? What will this person bring that's going to be different and powerful in my leadership team, not a deficit model of thinking? And then just thinking about kind of inclusive recruitment. Actually, once I applied, this is just from my own experience, I applied for a civil service job a while back, and what they did is they actually sent out saying, particularly if you've got these protected characteristics, this is what we'll do to support you. Here's, we're actually really thinking effectively in advance about what we're going to do to support you, rather than like retrospectively. And I just really appreciated that. So even though I didn't want the job, because like Susie was saying and George was saying, just curious about jobs, I just thought it was really powerful to see that's what the civil service do, just as a kind of blanket approach, rather than because I'm somebody who's got diverse and protected characteristics. So those are just some of the things that I'm learning from the project work, but also just from my own experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nadine, you're wearing multiple hats when I ask you this question, but like thinking about how diverse candidates who are going for the more senior roles, the leadership roles, what's your advice to the system, to the audience who are listening, heads, chairs of governors, HR directors, about how they can find, recruit and develop the global majority leaders who want to lead our schools?
Yeah, so ultimately the aim is to reduce bias in all the layers of their recruitment process. One thing I find is really helpful is actually not just thinking I'm going to post it on TAS or so forth, but actually identifying different grassroots organizations and people who are in spaces that have individuals from safe spaces for the global majority, and actually saying, look, signposting you, can you signpost this role to your community and so forth, and just realizing that there's not just that one way. Now that's ultimately going to happen now.
Get out of the way.
My company's telling me do not. Right, there you go. My office. I just think that's going to happen when I'm speaking and not when I'm not. But yes. So ultimately it's helping them to, again, thinking outside the box ultimately is that, and also going to different community events and so forth, like the AH Summit. Well, I think it's a great example where people are able to build connections and learn about different schools and what people are doing. That's a great opportunity to connect with ambitious individuals who are there and readily available to actually want to step into these positions. So, again, I say it's about branching out from those traditional avenues and actually looking at ways to connect with different organizations and raising a profile of those positions there.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think all four of you are very good at that networking side of it. If we want diverse candidates to see our adverts, we need to be diversifying our networks and thinking about not only how the adverts and the wording of the job specs is written, but also where they are. And you were talking, Susie, about sort of what's ticked and what's not ticked. I think we often put artificial barriers into a JDPS by saying people have to have things they don't actually need to have. You don't have to have an MPQH to be a head. You don't have to have an ASENCO award to be a SENCO. There are things we'd like you to have, but we can invest in you to get those things. So I think that's something for us all to consider. I often talk about self-deselection. We are often focused on who has applied, and we look at who has got the job, but we're not considering who hasn't applied and why. And we also aren't looking at who didn't make it to the interview stage, and I think also the attrition kind of like data is also something we need to be having a look at. So we have only got a couple of minutes left, and it's not enough time for me to ask a question. So I'm going to bring Ben back, and we're going to keep you here because I'm hoping we've got some questions from the audience that we're going to field to all of our speakers tonight. So Ben, back to you.
Thank you to that panel. Then it was amazing and nice to hear across the two panels the sort of threads that were that went between the two. So I'm going to add our panelists from panel 1 back in so we can have a wider open discussion. And like Hannah said, if any questions and things that you have, anything you'd like to ask, could you pop into the chat? Now, I think some of the questions that sort of have came through and sort of thoughts are a lot around, say, if I know in that second panel, we talked about flexible working and the things that we need. Apart from not applying for a role, or whether you're in an organisation, then you might not actually request flexible working on application, but then you might need flexible working or like flexible working or like other adjustments. How are some of the ways you can go about it? Because I know whilst there are policies and practices in place, we often can feel that guilt or feel that, you know, we're being a bit of a burden to other people by asking when we shouldn't. So what are some of the things that people could do, or where they could go for information if they're wanting it? I'll probably come to Lindsay first, if as I use the example of flex working, and then I think if anyone else, not to treat you like children as I have with my year sixes today, if you want to pop your hand up and contribute, feel free to. But yeah, Lindsay, if I come to you first.
Yeah, I think it's really hard. So we see a lot of bad practice in this area around. There have been some significant changes to the laws about flexible working and flexible working requests, and sometimes schools just change the policy and then they don't think about how that will work in practice. So you're now allowed to make 2 requests in a year, and actually the burden is not supposed to be on the applicant anymore of explaining how that flexible working request will fit into the school job design and management of the school running. The employer is now supposed to take the lead on that and, you know, seeing how that could work. And so actually I don't think applicants for flexible working should be doing like steps to make it easier. Employers have got a responsibility now, a legal responsibility to make sure that they are facilitating genuine discussion and consideration of these flexible working applications. And I think that will change even further when the Employment Rights Bill comes in, strengthening people's kind of employers' positive approach. Like, you should be saying, yes, I'll do this flexible working if I can. There were a couple of things that were mentioned about this earlier about like being a trailblazer. It's really hard if you're the first person to request flexible working, or if you're the first person to request reasonable adjustments. And we've seen it work really well where people just kind of say that up front to the line manager. Look, I know no one's done this before. I know no one's asked for flexible working. I know no one's asked for shared parental leave. Like, I'm happy to kind of be a guinea pig here and work through this with you together and review it and see how it goes. But also just using your networks. Like I'm like a broken record. We're just saying all the same things. I'm just saying what everyone else has said. But talking to other people who've done it, talking to other people who've made a request, asking your support networks for help, asking your trade unions for help, asking flexible teacher talent for help if you're making a flexible working request. Like we'll know people in a similar context who've gone through that process, and they're the best people really to learn from about how it works. But it's also really context specific. What works well when requesting flexible working arrangements in one school is completely different to what will work well in another. And that's why I really strongly feel that this legal shift in it being all about the employer trying to facilitate rather than the person requesting feeling like they're being a burden. Like it shouldn't be like that for flexible working or for reasonable adjustments.
Thanks, Lindsay. Nadine, come to you.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that, just to say that as leaders, we really have a responsibility within this realm, and I think that comes with modeling that from the top, because I think that really helps individuals to say, okay, if the head's doing that, then actually this is something that they believe in. I've even heard of a CEO who literally is saying, right, the meeting has to finish at this time because I need to go and pick up my child from school, and so forth, and it not being foreign conversation. And I think that's worked really well here. And I'm very transparent with my staff. I'm, with all the hats that I wear, I'm also, which I don't talk about often, I'm also caring for my dad and I care for my mum, and they're in two different places. So before work, I go to my mum's, I have to check in with her, I have to give her food and so forth. And same with my dad, I've got to go on the weekends and check in on him and clean and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of, even when, there were certain treatments, hospital treatments had to go for my dad, I was like, okay, I won't be here this morning or so forth. And then also it's come up to Christmas period, but even, the sports day and the play and so forth, it's, right, I won't be here this morning. I'm not hiding it because I'm going to watch my child. And then also my other staff members understand, yeah, I can ask that too. And that's okay. It's not something that we don't do here. No, we look at ways to accommodate and to help individuals to be able to bring their own whole self to work, because I think people think, oh, well, they're not here full time, then they can't bring the whole self. But actually, when you accommodate the whole person by acknowledging them and all their particular needs and so forth, then actually they bring an even better self into the workplace because they feel valued, acknowledged, and seen for the season of life that they are currently traveling through.
Thanks, Nadine. Susie?
Building on what Nadine just said about modelling these things, if I may take a moment to bang my particular drum, I don't have a teaching background, and the team that I line manage are fully support staff. And I think as leaders, we really need to be remembering support staff at the moment, because there is a lot of very, very flexible jobs out there that pay a lot more than education support staff roles, that we will lose people to. And what concerns me most is the number of leaders that I have heard say that they don't allow flexible working for support staff because teachers can't do it. And obviously I'm horrified, and I'm trying to fix this within my small sphere of influence. But I think we do need to remember that, support staff, particularly, student facing, but not forgetting office staff and teaching school hub staff and research school staff, all have exactly the same life experience, care and responsibilities, everything else, as the teachers that we're thinking about. So just a small plea not to forget support staff.
Thanks, Susie. I think that's really important, and that sort of equity in that flexible working, that flexible working will look slightly differently. Yes, if you're a classroom teacher versus a senior leader versus a member of support staff, but actually recognising that, because I think sometimes that's where people can get a bit frustrated when they're like, oh, because I'm a full-time class teacher and I've got to be in for period one, whereas that person doesn't need to be in for period one. They're allowed to start later, or they're a member of SLT, so they can leave early. And there can be a lot of animosity that can be caused by people feeling that they're being treated differently for that. But sometimes those people might feel that animosity, but might not have asked for those flexible working or made people, their line manager or relevant people aware of that. So thank you for that. That was a really important part. My sort of next question then to everyone is, one of the things that's came out from both panels, and it was even referenced there, was about that network and that sort of networking and having that network. It was mentioned in the first panel when we talked more about using and drawing upon your network when you're looking for roles. And have you heard about this school? Have you heard about this trust? What do you think? To looking at job descriptions, you can get some very generic ones or very quirky ones that look very differently, and being able to pull on people's experience for that. So what I thought we'd do in the last, as we've got the last couple of minutes, is come to sort of each of you, if that's okay, about a tip of how could you curate and develop that network if you're not sure where to. Obviously, we've got a great number of organisations tonight that are also networks, but what are some of the things that or if you've got one key tip that you would recommend using to leverage that network in terms of inclusive recruitment, whether that be from a candidate's perspective or from that employer's perspective. You might be an employer wanting to do inclusive recruitment better, if you like, if you feel like you're not there, or from a candidate's perspective. So I'll come from the order on my screen, but in reverse order. So George, can I come to you first, please? I know you don't like going first after that first one.
No, you can't, I'm afraid. I think for me, and this is quite difficult for me to answer, because in the space that I was in, I felt like I was alone. And one of the first spaces I looked at to support me was with the unions. So maybe that would be my advice for someone that feels that they haven't got someone who understands where they are at work. They're not sure where to find stuff online. Obviously, what I would call Twitter, when it was Twitter, was good. What it is now, less so. But I think actually, if you're someone who's genuinely struggling and you haven't found a place to be, that actually, if you get in touch with the unions, there are places to go. So I will go first. But I think if you're genuinely feeling like there's nowhere else to go, the unions have some really great networks for people like us.
Thank you, George. Uta?
So yeah, I agree with George. I think the union is a great starting point. And I remember actually when I was NQT at the time, and I actually went on a residential to discuss behavior strategies during that first year. And I'm still in touch with the people I met during that training organized by the union. So definitely the union is a good starting point. I also agree with Twitter, because this is how I actually got in touch with Ben. So definitely Twitter. What I would also suggest in addition would be, if you're going into any kind of CPD outside of your school. So for example, if you're doing an NPQ, you will most likely, I know this was the case for me, be in touch with people who are sharing the same ambition, the same goal professionally, but they are not in your school, most likely. So I think this is very useful because it helps you to kind of get a different kind of experience. I think when you are in your own school doing, professional development with people who are in the same position, it's kind of sometimes an echo chamber. Whereas if you get that opportunity to do a training with other participants, I think it will be very useful. So this would be the third tip that I would like to share.
Thanks, Uta. Janoy?
Hi. Last thing, I'd definitely say review who's potentially on the interview panel. I think it's important that different lenses are shared but also represented. And I think that what that does is that it offers a level of accountability for those who are being interviewed, but then also it gives you a varied perspective for different angles that you're looking for.
Thanks, Janoy. Susie?
I think in terms of kind of developing or leveraging a network, for me, for social media, LinkedIn is brilliant. Again, not a teacher, but I use it for the Teaching School Hub. But I find that people are incredibly receptive on LinkedIn. Drop a comment, repost something, and your algorithm will start giving you the feeds of people with similar interests and similar enthusiasms. And also sign up for any newsletter you can find, because it is amazing the opportunities you can find. There are free webinars, free CPD sessions, and you can slowly start to build a network that way if you don't have one kind of ready-made for yourself.
That's great. Thanks, Susie. Lindsay?
I'm going to be really cheeky and just do a tip and an action. So tip, those speaking about webinars and resources available, we're still part of this DFE program that's running until March, which offers free flexible working support for schools, and there's loads of webinars on there for different groups, different types of schools, and different times in life when you might need flexible working. they're still available, and the support's all free till March. And the other action that is something that Emma Shepherd from the MTPT project and we used to do at Flexible Teach Talent is people used to post job adverts on Twitter or on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and we would say, oh, is this open to flexible working? Will you make reasonable adjustments for this if people are applying? Because we're in a more privileged position where we can ask those questions and we don't mind being a pain in the bum. We're not applying for those jobs, and when we have that privilege to do that, so we will start doing that again, and remember that that's important for people to see that message.
Thank you, Lindsay. Nadine?
Okay, I might cheat because I'll say a couple. Right, just in terms of PLN, which Hannah herself taught me, and I remember way back, your professional learning network, and being able to really lean in towards that, and whether that's through LinkedIn or so forth, it's really, really important to do that, and just follow people who look interesting and who kind of align with your values, or you like in terms of what they're saying or their reflections. And you think, oh, okay, follow and see what they're doing. And then I think recognizing that networking is about a two-way. It's a two-way thing. So thinking about your skill set and what you feel your strengths are and what you're really good at, look for ways to. I'm not suggesting go and find more work on top of everything else you've got to do, but looking at ways that you can share resources or share ideas and so forth based on things that you feel are your strengths, and then you'll find that people naturally gravitate, and then you kind of find your people in that way. And then lastly, I would just say, just ask. If you know someone, just ask, what networks do you know of? Just ask, and I'm sure someone will be able to give you an answer, and you'll find that you'll find out so much more just by that one question.
Thanks, Nadine. And last but by no means least, Yamina?
I think we all know I love a good network. Here represented Chiltern Learning Trust, and Hannah's already mentioned the Racial Equity Networking Dinner is one way in which you can kind of lean into that network. But just thinking about affinity groups and, sometimes finding those safe spaces. So I actually met Hannah through Women Ed, and that's how I got involved in Women Ed as a grassroots organisation, which then led me into like BAME Ed and then LGBT Ed and which then obviously, that's how Belong in Effect, formerly known as Diverse Educators, came about. And I'm actually co-founder of South Asian Educators Network, and colleagues within Belong in Effect also lead like Pride and Progress, and thinking about those affinity groups, because there is so much out there that we can lean into as part of that support network of people who share our experiences, our lived experiences, and really thinking about how also from that intersectional lens, I think Belong in Effect and Aspiring Head, Black Teachers Connect, there's so Black Curriculum, there's so many networks out there that I could just signpost again and again. And we know on the Belong in Effect website, all of those kind of are listed and you can connect with them. But find that affinity group that really can kind of share it, where you can share that kind of vulnerability openly and leverage those networks, because I wouldn't be here without it. And I say that quite honestly and openly. And through the network, I've had lots of coaching from Hannah, from lots of other colleagues who've then supported and uplifted me and create safe spaces. And I attended the last Aspiring Head Summit, and it was exceptional. And I learned so much, and I connected with so many new people. And it's finding those new people as well that's opened up a different kind of those different opportunities as well. So think about who those affinity groups are. Hannah? Sorry.
Hannah? And
I want to add one. I think your point there, Yamina, about finding affinity groups. If you're the only person with your identity, you need a circle of people who share your lived experience. But to anyone who sits in a majority identity like me, so put yourself out of your comfort zone. Go to a conference where you're the only white person there, where you're the only straight person there. Like, that is how other people feel all the time. And actually, we need to go and find diverse candidates, and we need to grow our networks. If you're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, don't just follow people who look like you, who think like you. You need to consciously curate it and diversify it and make it a team commitment that the whole of the SLT, the whole of the governing body are growing the network around the school. It's not on one person.
Thanks, Hannah. Thank you, everyone, for your time tonight. I know we've ran over slightly in terms of our panel discussion, but I think it was a really useful and important conversation linking into what we're about to present. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving up your time and your evenings to be with us. I'm going to hand over to Hannah now as we move on to our final part. So I'll just share the screen and then I will do
just
some
a little bit of
digging.
time. Yeah, and Janoy had to disappear. The tannoy was going in his school, otherwise he was going to sleep in his office. So he said to say goodbye. So for everybody who has joined us tonight and listened to all of our fantastic speakers and contributions from those two panels and also from the Q&A, what we want you to think about is, what is your takeaway going to be? Don't just come and listen. What is the action? What is the call to action? Is there something you can do tomorrow, this week, before Christmas, to cascade, to share, to ask a question? And then what is it you can do as we go into the major recruitment window in the spring term, where hopefully we're going to see lots of adverts coming up? We have to convert intention into impact. We have to make sure that we care, but we're actually challenging and getting curious about the things we're doing around us. So if you are able to pop a comment in the chat, let us know what your takeaway is going to be, what your next step's going to be. But we're also going to follow up by inviting you to join some of our community spaces, where we're going to signpost some of the resources that are on the last few slides as well. So you don't just, yeah, what's next? Was this me or you? This was me, wasn't it? So we'll do a follow-up email. We've got a free toolkit on our website where we've curated lots of useful information for you to share with those key influencers. We run training, as do some of the organisations who are here tonight. Yamina mentioned the jobs board. So we have got a partnership and we've got a diversity jobs board, and there are free adverts if you are advertising to recruit into ITTE. All adverts for skits are free. For governors, we've not talked about governance tonight, but we need to diversify our governing bodies and our MAP boards in order to diversify leadership. So you do free adverts for governors. And if you are advertising for a DEI lead, an EDI lead, an anti-racist lead, whatever you want to call the person responsible for inclusion, those adverts are also free. Okay, so if you're looking for a vacancy, come on our website. But if you've got adverts you are posting, we are putting them out. We then put them onto our LinkedIn and put them into our newsletter. And we've got several thousand people who hold diverse identities looking for opportunities. Do you want to talk about your workshop, Ben, that's coming up?
Yeah, thank you. So this was an event we did in the past. It was one of our first virtual events. It was something that people asked for, and I think we're going to do something similar soon, because we surveyed our community, and a lot of our community are looking for their next step and looking for that promotion. We had a fantastic event. It was our first virtual event post-launching. We had some great people on there, like Vivian Porritt from Women Ed, Sophie and Sadiq from Chiltern Learning Trust, so many similar connections tonight, where we actually went through that sort of process from before you even think about applying through to that negotiation of a new role. So it's on our YouTube. We'll make sure that when we send the email out that you've got the links, and we've clipped it down with the different speakers as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. And you've got the recording of this will be shared with you, so you can obviously mobilize that and cascade that. But a lot of our speakers have also written blogs around recruitment and how to diversify it and how to inclusify it. So you've got some quick links here. Like if you can get this inserted into an agenda or into a staff mail out, it's how you can begin to drip feed and influence others who have positional power to actually really go about making significant changes.
And that brings us to the very end of our collaboration. So thank you so much if you've joined us. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Hannah, for co-hosting and co-organising with us. So if you want to find out more about Step Up, our website is there. We are doing quite a bit of work on our website at the moment. So some of it does look probably a little bit strange and a little bit inaccessible, but we're planning on having our website fully up and running by the 1st of February, and you can get in touch with us there. Hannah, I know you've got a lot on your website to share, and I've posted some of the links in the chat, but was there anything else you wanted to
No, what I'll do is I'll do a follow-up email once the recording is edited and it's on our respective websites. I'll do an email out to you all with all of those different links we've mentioned, so you've got it to forward on. We've got a community space on Mighty Network, so if you are on LinkedIn, you're not on Twitter, everybody in that space is really committed to DEIB and doing things differently and signposting and sharing resources. So I'll send you an invite to that, and we can start a kind of a message board, questions, and sort of further signposting there as well. So just wait for an email in a few days' time with lots of different links, signposting, and invitations.
And thank you once again for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Like Hannah said, we'll clip down different recording segments, send out all those links because there's so much to share. And as Hannah said, please do be part of that commitment and that conversation. It's great you're here, but be even greater to share it with those who aren't, and to get that impact. Thank you once again. Have a lovely rest of your evening if you're watching live, and we hope to see you at another Belonging Effect event or Step Up event very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone.